Again, I want to introduce myself as Scott Tayler, Director of Congregational Life, but this is my new life. I should also introduce myself by my old life, which was serving with my wife, Reverend Karen Anderson, in Rochester, New York, and Canandaigua, New York. I served the last 5 years of my ministry, served 2 congregations, co-senior minister at the First Unitarian Church of Rochester and lead minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, where we had a yoked relationship. So that's the model I want to share today. But I first want to kind of step back and highlight that today is really sort of, I was thinking of it as a taste, right? I was thinking advertisement, but that minimizes things too much. But as a taste. And the reason I say that is the wonderful multi-site midwife team that was introduced to you at the beginning of this, we are, represents field staff that serve you across the country. And we are glad to coordinate with you to bring a bigger workshop around multi-site to any of your districts or regions where we can have more than a taste, but really sit down and have a meal together on this. So I wanted to make sure and make that clear to folks. The other thing I wanted to do before I share my model or the yoked is sort of step back and think about what we just heard. Because we have such limited time today, we don't have a chance to draw pictures, but I want to highlight sort of the 4 models that you've heard. And from my perspective, if you've not already kind of, if this hasn't been teased out explicitly, I want to do it now. So notice what we've seen, one model as being what might be called the merger model, which is what Daniel had represented. And you notice the word culture popped up when all of us were talking. And I would say in that merger model, what you have is a merging, or as Daniel was trying to say, just straight up, a giving up of culture, right? So a merging and even a giving up of culture is part of that experience. Kathleen got up, and I would describe her model maybe as a campus model. So campus model, and in that you have, well, how would I put that one? That one I would say sort of reaching multiple cultures, right? That's the power of that model. So instead of merging or giving up culture, you used her model as one to reach another culture. Wendy got up and did the satellite model, which that I think might be described as extending one's culture, right? Not reaching another culture, not requiring somebody to give up a culture, but extending a culture that you have. The model that I want to lift up that is, we're calling different things. Sometimes it's called a yoked model. If you're a Midwest kid like me, that makes sense because you've grown up with cows and you know what that means. But if that doesn't work for you, or you don't want to feel like cows, the other thing we call this is a partnership or a staff sharing model. And I wanted to say it that way because in this case, it's not merging cultures, it's not extending culture, it's not adding a new culture, it's 2 unique cultures coming together to share staff and expand the power of each congregation's unique culture. Does that kind of make sense as distinctions? So merging culture, reaching multiple cultures, extending culture, 2 unique cultures coming together to share and have more robust services. Two cultures coming together to do something new and bigger together. I want to quickly run through so that the yoked or the sharing model, I would say, has a unique form. So the unique form is staff sharing. Think of this model as staff sharing. So unlike mergers or satellites, what makes the web in this case, I mean, you can imagine sort of a picture. What makes the web in this case is not so much the congregations, but a web of staff serving multiple congregations. So the web in this case that's holding things together is staff. And that can be, if the congregations are larger, that can be a whole staff team serving multiple congregations, or if they're smaller, that might be 2 congregations coming together to even share 1 staff member. But still, it's important to understand this. The staff sits there as sort of the web that starts to pull things together. There's also, I would say, a unique desire in this model. I think you've heard a lot of theological, evangelical desires for the other mergers. This one is a little more practical. There's a practical desire to eliminate redundancies and create more sustainable ministry, which I'll go into together. So it's more of a practical approach. The other thing I would say is it has a unique relational experience. When you have two models coming together to share staffing, that's very different than the feeling of having to give something up or to merge. Now there's pluses and minuses, right? You stay separate. There's some real downsides in not being able to combine as powerfully as the other models. But that definitely makes it a different relational experience. And then the other thing I would highlight is a unique way of growing together, which leads me into strengths, okay? So that's the what. That's the what of the yoked. The strengths of this model, again, just if you have the picture in your mind of multiple congregations, and I don't mean to make it like top down or over, but for, right now, just so you can visualize, if the staff serve as sort of that web, I think that speaks to one of the strengths, right? So this model preserves much of each congregation's independence and unique identity. So you can see how that is I see there's being some downsides in that, but in our culture, I think there are politics involved. Our independence is very strong among us for some unhealthy and for some healthy reasons. But to the degree that we have some healthy reasons to hold on to unique pieces of our identity that we don't want to lose, that is the strength of this model. It doesn't require you to give those up. I'm looking at some of my friends here. For instance, the yoked relationship we had, the smaller church of Canandaigua had the practice of joys and sorrows. We all know kind of the debates around joys and sorrows. Nobody had to give up joys and sorrows, right? Nobody had to give up their unique music in some ways to be served by one staff. At the same time, I would say the strength is that this model allows one to organically and more naturally grow towards shared DNA and mission. Now, again, I want to argue that there's even more power in the other models, as everybody was saying, to have one church in multiple places, one mission binding you together. First of all, there's just amazing power in that, right? But practically, we all know the politics of if the way you start to dance before we get on the dance floor is we have to do a common mission statement together. 4 years before we get to the dance floor, 8, 10, wordsmith, So what the model, this unique way of growing together, I describe more as, it is shared DNA, but it comes at it differently than mission-based. I picked up the word family-based because our family is a blended family. This is an odd analogy maybe, but my two stepkids, non-biological children, many people come up to me and say, God, they look just like you. They don't look just like me at all, right? Not at all, but what they do is have my mannerisms. So we have grown together over time, not by having shared DNA, but slowly over time becoming one family, and out of that arises mission. So it's a model that allows you to let mission come organically rather than being the front end. And I'm not arguing better one way or the other. You have to decide what fits your unique situation. The last thing I would highlight about the strengths. How am I doing, Tandy? Oh, crud. All right. Oh. Well, I'll take 3 and be real quick. All right. So the last one is this model. Remember when I talked about being practical? And again, I don't want to minimize it, but there's some real practical strengths of this. It enables what I would say sustainable and efficient ministry. So those are the 2 reasons. Those are 2 practical reasons you might do this model. So first of all, on sustainable ministry, we all know, those of us who are in smaller congregations or serve smaller congregations, how hard it is when you have a minister at a quarter time or half time, how much turnover happens in a congregation, and how hard that is, almost unkind to the ministry staff involved. So in terms of our movement getting serious about getting sustainable ministry for the sake of congregations and for the sake of kindness to ministers themselves, having 2 or 3 congregations come together to have one full-time position is one of the huge benefits of that. The same thing I would say about maybe larger churches coming together. There's sustainability there where ministers, by allowing instead of 3 solo ministers to each serve separately 3 different congregations, ask any religious professional in the room, whether minister or RE, they are hungry to be on a team. And if you give them the options of serving an isolated congregation solo all by yourself for 10 years, or being able to be on a creative team where we all get to play to our strengths, that person will stay there for 20 years. Is that making sense? Okay. Efficiency is the last one that I'd highlight real quick. So that's sustainable. There's also efficient ministry. I don't have time to go into this, but the simplistic thing is when you look around in any of our areas and you take a geographic area and you notice on any given week, we have 5 ministers spending anywhere from 50 to 70 hours. I don't know how, including reading books. Some of us happen to read books to write these sermons, right? So you have 5 ministers spending 60 to 80 hours to do 5 separate sermons that they only give once. Versus if you united there, you could have one minister writing a sermon and rotating around.
Amen, brother.
All right? Sermons would be better. And think about all the freed up time and energy for other justice work, for other membership work, for other coaching of lay leaders, and maybe even a little bit of time to go see the movies for your staff, right? So that's the one on efficiency. I could go into that more, but I think that simplistic idea makes enough sense. 3 quick challenges and weaknesses. The challenges or weaknesses of this model is it requires incredibly savvy staff. And what I mean by that is it relies on the personality of staff to make sure that they are not just doing their preferred programs, but paying attention to the unique identity of each congregation and tailoring programming to make sure to preserve that identity. That's not an easy task. It's a lot easier if we're just trying to replicate. So that's a big challenge for your staff. It also takes congregational vigilance. Because the 2 congregations aren't starting off merging as one, you have to always work to find opportunities to break out of your silos. So one best example I give is it will not work. You will not grow together as one family if what you do, for instance, with your small group program is just you do your small group program, even if it's the same kind of small group program over here, and then the other group would do it over here, is not the same as you finding opportunities to suddenly have a small group program made up of half of one congregation, half of the other. But vigilantly trying to find creative ways that you actually grow together as a family, not stay in your separate worlds just served by this one staff, is a huge challenge. The other one is this model requires policy governance for any size church. Because if you're going to have one team or one minister trying to creatively serve all these multiple needs, we have to empower that team or that ministry with the ability to have big boundaries, big buckets of boundaries, but be able to make managerial decisions on the spot. We all know how policy governance is this hot button for all of us, so that's why it's a challenge. But you have to work through that to be able to get to this model. I think I'd stop there. The last thing I'd say is theologically, I have served, 5 congregations so far. I've served all size congregations so far. It wasn't until the last 5 years of my ministry that I ever felt that I served a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Because I served 2 congregations trying to break out of silos and be more together. And it's the first time I would say that I ever served a congregational system that reflected our theology of interdependence.
Right on. That's cool.
And that was powerful for me and a huge gift, and is a large reason why I'm very grateful for everybody sharing what they did and for you being here as well. So thank you.